The official designation was Temporal Dissonance Event 74 Alpha. We call it the Chronos Leak. It is the sound of the world ending, or perhaps the world beginning again slightly wrong. We have obtained unauthorized access to the raw, unedited audio file, timestamp 317 Zulu, recorded deep within the subterranean facility beneath April Woods. The facility known only in redacted reports as Site 47. You are not listening to static. You are listening to time tearing itself apart. Listen closely. The first 12 seconds are just a high-frequency whine, escalating past the threshold of human hearing, the sound of colossal energies being forced into a container too small to hold them. Then comes the voice, distorted, not by poor reception, but by temporal shift. It's Dr. Alastair Thorne, the lead project director, screaming, though the scream seems layered over itself, occupying 3 distinct moments simultaneously. We hear him shout. We have a catastrophic reflection. Initiate Jericho. I see the future closing the loop. And then the critical, horrifying moment. The key phrase that led directly to the indefinite, classified banning of public entry into the entirety of the April Woods ecosystem. A secondary, calmer voice, unidentified, but clearly in command, cutting through the chaos like a razor blade. It stated with unnerving composure. Containment failed. The pocket is unstable. Seal all primary and secondary exits. We are not protecting the personnel from the woods. We are protecting the continuum from the personnel. Execute full quarantine protocols. The woods are forfeit. That single, chilling instruction, delivered amidst a symphony of catastrophic failure, screaming alarms, breaking glass, and a sound like colossal clockwork seizing up, marked the moment April Woods ceased being a national forest and became a federally sealed temporal anomaly. Project Chronos, initiated under the benign guise of advanced geological research, was never seeking gold or oil. It was seeking the moment before the beginning, and whatever it found, it was powerful enough to rewrite reality, forcing a total information lockdown. The ensuing cover story, a highly toxic biohazard spill, was immediately deployed. But our analysis of the leaked internal security memos shows the true objective, containing a phenomenon that threatens not just life, but causality itself. The level of resources deployed, the secrecy maintained for over 4 decades, and the sheer ruthlessness of the entry ban protocols, which include immediate lethal force authorization for unauthorized breaches, suggests that the event recorded in that chilling audio clip was not merely an accident, but the opening of a door that, once opened, could never truly be closed. The woods, according to the deep state internal logs, are now classified as a self-correcting temporal exclusion zone, or STZ. This designation implies that the anomaly is actively regenerating, and perhaps even expanding, necessitating the unprecedented, permanent exclusion order that prevents any soul from witnessing what is now happening within that forbidden territory. To understand the catastrophic implications of the Chronos Leak, we must trace the origin of Site 47 and the shadowy organization that birthed it, the Ether Dynamics Institute, ADI. While appearing on paper as a nonprofit focusing on advanced materials science and tectonic strain measurement, the ADI was, in reality, a clandestine deep-state partnership established in the late 1970s, funded by layers of shell corporations tied to 3 major global defense contractors. Their initial interest in April Woods was genuinely geological. Satellite telemetry and airborne LiDAR scans had revealed a profound, almost perfect circular subterranean structure beneath the forest floor, inconsistent with known tectonic activity or meteorite impact. Further seismic surveys detected an unusual concentration of a rare earth element they designated chromium-22, possessing unique isotopic properties. Unlike standard radioactive elements, chromium-22 did not decay predictably. Its molecular structure seemed to fluctuate based on external energetic input, hinting at properties that defied classical physics. This anomaly quickly became the obsession of Dr. Alastair Thorne, a brilliant but ethically compromised theoretical physicist recruited directly from a highly compartmentalized defense research lab in Nevada. Thorne theorized that the confluence of chromium-22 and the specific geospatial coordinates of April Woods, a suspected ancient impact site that created a massive natural resonator, formed a low-energy temporal bleed-through point. In layman's terms, a natural weak spot in the fabric of spacetime. Chronos was born from the mandate to weaponize this weak spot, to learn how to manipulate localized temporal physics, potentially allowing for instantaneous communications across vast distances, or more critically, strategic temporal displacement of assets. Initial tests were horrifyingly successful, but uncontrollable. Wildlife near the designated experimental clearing, now known as the chronometer clearing, exhibited impossible aging cycles. A deer tracked via telemetry aged 6 years in 3 days, while a captured coyote appeared to grow younger until it reverted to a fetal state and simply vanished from the monitoring cage. These early incidents, meticulously documented in the highly redacted Fringe Observation Logs 1-9, confirmed that the woods were already exhibiting signs of temporal instability long before the Chronos team ramped up their high-energy experiments. The construction of Site 47 involved drilling a massive, reinforced shaft directly into the Chromium-22 deposit, creating a subterranean laboratory shielded by several hundred feet of granite. The entire operation was masked by a comprehensive logging and reforestation initiative, ensuring constant, plausible civilian traffic around the periphery while the real work, trying to contain and control the forces of time itself, unfolded in the silent darkness below. The deeper the project drilled, the closer they got to the core anomaly, the more manic and desperate Thorne's internal communications became, culminating in the fateful decision that led to the Chronos Leak. The journey into the documentation surrounding Project Chronos is a descent into bureaucratic madness and terrifying hubris. We managed to acquire a cache of internal site blueprints for Site 47, initially mislabeled as plans for a hydroelectric dam project. These schematics reveal a highly sophisticated facility, not designed for containment failure, but for perpetual escalation. Key among the leaked documents is a memo, stamped Chronos for AIs only, detailing the structural integrity analysis of the main experimental chamber, the flux resonator dome. The analysis concluded that the dome could theoretically withstand a localized temporal acceleration event up to 15,000 petaflops, but cautioned against exceeding 10,000, citing unpredictable geospatial distortion vectors. Thorne, according to the archived communication logs, dismissed these warnings as overly cautious. He was fixated on reaching level 5 stability, which he believed was the minimum power necessary to generate a controllable, sustained temporal echo. The blueprints also highlight the existence of a specialized energy source, not standard fission, but a custom-built magnetic confinement fusion reactor, purely dedicated to powering the Chronos device. The amount of energy required to manipulate the fundamental laws of the universe is staggering, explaining the massive security perimeter needed to keep the public away from the power infrastructure alone. Furthermore, the documents expose the deep organizational paranoia prevalent at Site 47. Every scientist was paired with a control officer, CO, a non-scientific operative with full authorization to terminate experiments, and personnel, if certain preset ethical or safety boundaries were crossed. It's the logs detailing the interactions between Thorne and his assigned CO, Major Elena Vargas, that offer the most chilling insight. Vargas consistently warned Thorne about the increasing frequency of chronal bleed-through incidents, moments when objects or sounds from the facility's past or future momentarily materialized. One log entry describes Vargas witnessing a wrench levitating midair, only to violently snap back into the timeline, scoring a deep gouge into the steel floor. Thorne's response, captured in a typed memo, was clinical and dismissive. Unacceptable data contamination. Continue with power spool up. We must achieve resonance before the next lunar cycle, regardless of minor structural inconvenience. This arrogance, coupled with the immense, unfathomable power they were attempting to harness, created a volatile situation, documented meticulously in the very files that were intended to be permanently destroyed during the Protocol Jericho execution. These fragments of documentation, architectural plans, technical warnings, and dismissive scientific memos, paint a picture of an investigation that was spiraling out of control, heading directly toward the inevitable, catastrophic failure that the chilling Chronos audio finally captured. The pressure leading up to the TD-74 Alpha incident was astronomical. Dr. Thorne was attempting what his own models suggested was mathematically impossible: stabilizing a multi-dimensional temporal ripple in real time. The specific goal on the night of the leak was the echo experiment, sending a stabilized 1-second chronological signal 24 hours into the past, and then immediately receiving a verification signal back. This required pushing the magnetic confinement reactor beyond its designated safety threshold, hitting 12,000 petaflops of energy output, well above the stability warnings. The logs show that Major Vargas vehemently protested, detailing the increasing environmental instability, equipment vibrating out of sync with the facility's internal clock, shadows extending and contracting independent of the lighting cycles, and a pervasive, metallic smell described by technicians as burnt eternity. Thorne ignored her final, written warning, which cited the increasingly frequent self-correction attempts by the local space-time field. He believed that the field was fighting their efforts, and only a massive injection of controlled energy could overcome this natural resistance. The team operating the main Chronos array, 3 graduate physicists and 4 engineers, were visibly strained, working 36-hour shifts, fueled by desperation and high-dosage stimulants. The final countdown sequence, documented in the last legible printout recovered before the system purge, reads like a death warrant. At T-10 minutes, the containment field monitors spiked wildly, not fluctuating between high and low, but displaying illogical data. Readings from the following day, overlaid onto the current moment. At T-3 minutes, the cooling system failed, not due to mechanical error, but because the water molecules, according to the sensor logs, seemed to momentarily forget their cohesive properties. The atmosphere inside the resonator dome was thick with dread, captured in shaky, recovered security footage descriptions that show technicians moving with a disturbing hesitancy, as if navigating deep water. Thorne, positioned behind the main control console, was reportedly sweating profusely, his face reflecting the deep green glow of the overloading power indicators. He was not looking at the readouts. He was staring fixedly at the center of the dome, where a shimmering, visible ripple of heat, color, and absolute vacuum began to manifest. This was the moment of singularity, the final act of hubris before the temporal fabric of April Woods tore itself wide open, ushering in the chaos that justified the total, permanent ban. The breach was instantaneous and utterly devastating, unfolding in a fraction of a second, but reverberating across indeterminate distances and moments in time. As the energy hit 12,000 petaflops, the magnetic containment field didn't fail in the typical sense. It simply ceased to exist for a perceived instant, allowing the full force of the localized temporal displacement wave to slam into the surrounding facility. The internal security cameras, though their recordings are mostly corrupted, managed to capture the physical effect. Not an explosion of fire and debris, but an implosion of reality. Walls seemed to momentarily fold into themselves, and personnel were subjected to extreme, localized time acceleration. We analyzed the descriptions from the surviving cleanup reports. One engineer, designated subject R11, was found standing upright but appeared physically aged by roughly 50 years. His clothing was pristine, suggesting the aging was purely biological and temporal. In the center of the dome, the Chronos device itself seemed to dissolve, leaving behind only a large, obsidian-like stain that radiated intense residual chromium-22 energy. This was the moment the audio clip captured. Thorne's layered, triple-time scream, followed by the terrifying realization of the commander, Major Vargas, that they had achieved not control, but replication. They had created a miniature, unstable version of the Wood's natural temporal anomaly within the facility itself. Vargas's immediate response, the decision to sacrifice the facility and all remaining personnel by initiating Protocol Jericho, effectively sealing the area permanently, was the only rational action in the face of literal breakdown of causality. Protocol Jericho was a pre-planned, absolute quarantine measure, designed only for scenarios where the immediate threat level surpassed planetary security. It mandated the instant destruction of all documentation, immediate cessation of all egress points, and the initiation of a permanent, weaponized perimeter. The official reason for the ban was declared to the outside world within 2 hours. A highly volatile, weaponized chemical agent spill had rendered April woods lethal to all biological life for the next century. But the audio leak proves this was a lie designed to mask a far more profound and existential threat. Now consider this, because the implications are critical. If a handful of scientists, fueled by ambition, could accidentally tear open the fabric of time in a subterranean laboratory, what does that imply about the stability of the entire woods, which naturally possesses the same chaotic energies? Is the ban truly about keeping us out, or is it a desperate attempt to keep something that they accidentally summoned contained? We invite you to consider the ethical boundary crossed by Dr. Thorne. At what point does the pursuit of ultimate knowledge justify risking the very structure of reality? Share your perspective in the comments below. If you were Major Vargas, hearing the impossible scream of a future and past version of your commander overlapping, would you have pulled the lever on Protocol Jericho, damning a wilderness to eternal quarantine? Or would you have attempted a dangerous rescue, risking the spread of a temporal contagion? The choices made in that terrifying moment define the fate of April woods forever. The analysis of the Chronos Leak audio is paramount to understanding the nature of the ban. The recording, designated TD-74, Alpha Master, is only 47 seconds long, but its internal structure suggests it captured events spanning several minutes or even hours, compressed and layered due to the severe temporal distortion. Our forensic audio engineer, operating under extreme non-disclosure agreements, isolated 4 distinct acoustic phenomena within the clip. First, the baseline distortion hum, a deep subsonic resonance consistent with massive energy flux passing through chromium-22. Second, the triple-time vocalization, Dr. Thorne's layered scream. Further analysis confirmed that the vocal track consisted of 3 distinct frequency signatures, correlating to the same human voice separated by an estimated delta of 4.2 seconds. It wasn't an echo, it was the same man existing in 3 distinct temporal states simultaneously, a horrifying auditory signature of chronal entanglement. Third, and perhaps most disturbing, the phantom movement signature. Throughout the clip, beneath the alarms and shouting, there is a distinct, rhythmic scraping sound, like heavy equipment being dragged across concrete. This sound defies logic, because all heavy equipment in the resonator dome had already been shut down and secured. The scraping seems to move from the center of the dome toward an identified personnel hatch, and then abruptly stops, replaced by a wet, heavy thud. There is no accompanying video footage for this segment, but the implication is terrifying. Something or someone was trying to exit the anomaly zone during the containment process, and it was moving against the flow of time, creating a physical sound that should not have been possible. Finally, we have the silent void. The last 1.5 seconds of the clip are not silent static, they are absolute digital zero. All energy readings, all audio spikes, all environmental noise vanishes completely, replaced by a vacuum of sound. This digital void suggests that the temporal pocket expanded violently, swallowing all sensory data in that specific slice of space and time. It is theorized that this void marks the moment the facility officially collapsed into itself, sealing the central anomaly. The audio, therefore, is not merely evidence of a chaotic accident. It is the final, auditory testament to the complete breakdown of physical reality inside Site-47. The authoritative voice of Major Vargas, issuing Protocol Jericho, was a desperate act of triage, sealing the wound. But the faint, rhythmic scraping preceding the final void suggests that the infection, the temporal instability, may have successfully interacted with the outer perimeter before the final containment, meaning the danger is not just localized to the hole in the ground, but has potentially bled out into the wider woods, justifying the expansive, permanent entry ban. The immediate aftermath of the Chronos Leak was a textbook example of high-level government concealment, executed with brutal efficiency under the operation codename Blue Shift. Blue Shift was composed primarily of engineering and psychological warfare specialists, tasked not with rescue, but with establishing and maintaining the facade of a lethal chemical contamination zone. The sheer logistics required to fake an environmental disaster of this magnitude are staggering. The perimeter fence, which now defines the forbidden boundaries of April woods, was erected in less than 72 hours, utilizing prefabricated, high-security paneling flown in on unmarked military transport jets. The official story, that a highly volatile, experimental nerve agent designated Agent Delta 9 had been accidentally released from a nearby decommissioned laboratory, was immediately fed to compliant media outlets. To reinforce this narrative, hundreds of barrels containing non-toxic, highly conspicuous fluorescent green dye were strategically dumped along the major access roads, along with prefabricated signs warning of extreme chemical toxicity. Crucially, Blue Shift operatives employed psychological operations, PSYOPs, techniques against the local populace. They utilized directional acoustic devices to broadcast highly specific, unsettling sounds near the perimeter. Phantom animal screams, garbled radio transmissions, and most effectively, high-pitched whining consistent with advanced mechanical failure. This manufactured terror was intended to drive away curious locals and reinforce the perception that the woods were irrevocably toxic and dangerous, thereby self-enforcing the entry ban. The goal was to replace rational curiosity with primal fear. Simultaneously, Site 47 itself was subjected to massive structural manipulation. Heavy earth movers were brought in to collapse the original entry shafts and ventilation systems, sealing the subterranean complex under hundreds of feet of engineered rubble. This was not just about hiding evidence. It was about creating a physical, impenetrable barrier against a force they could not understand, a physical cork in the bottle of time. Even the local military base, ostensibly responsible for security, was fed a sanitized version of the contamination story, keeping the vast majority of personnel unaware that they were guarding a dimensional tear rather than a chemical spill. This elaborate, multi-layered deception proves the profound fear held by the project controllers. They recognized that the threat was not merely local, but potentially global, demanding an absolute, military-enforced cordon sanitaire against reality itself. For the first 3 years following the permanent entry ban, the perimeter of April Woods was remarkably quiet, except for the incessant patrolling of Blue Shift units. However, around the 4th anniversary of the Chronos Leak, reports began to surface from periphery residents and unauthorized hikers that suggested the containment was faltering, or perhaps, that the temporal anomaly was actively pushing against its physical restraints. These reports, initially dismissed as folklore and paranoia, were collected by a retired local sheriff, Elias Vance, who documented what he called shoreline incidents, anomalies occurring precisely along the established perimeter fence. One highly detailed account came from a Border Patrol agent, identified only as Agent K, who reported a sustained observation near the Obsidian Stream section of the perimeter. Agent K claimed to have witnessed a vehicle, specifically a 1970s-era pickup truck, materialize inside the woods, roughly 50 feet past the fence line. The vehicle was stationary, covered in dust, and appeared structurally sound. The unsettling detail, however, was that the agent saw the truck instantly and violently de-age. Within the space of 10 seconds, the paint shifted, rust disappeared, and the truck reverted to a factory-new condition before, just as quickly, disappearing entirely, leaving behind only compressed dirt. This phenomenon suggests temporal bleed-through, localized instances where the instability of the SDZ briefly manifests outside the ban zone, essentially showing snippets of the wood's past. Another report, logged by Sheriff Vance, detailed a hunter who claimed to hear voices emanating from deep within the woods. Not typical screams or shouts, but highly formalized, echoing military commands. When the hunter used directional microphones, he allegedly captured fragments of dialogue that matched internal communications procedures used by Site 47 personnel before the disaster, specifically mentioning Dr. Thorne's name and referencing flux stability levels. The most frequent type of observation, however, involved the phenomenon of ghost echoes. Residents living miles from the ban area began reporting instances where they would hear a sound, a car horn, a dog barking, a slamming door, seconds before the event actually occurred. While scientifically dubious, the sheer volume of geographically clustered reports suggests that the temporal distortion radiating from April Woods is not merely confined to the perimeter, but is subtly impacting the immediate environment, creating a microlayer of chronological displacement for anyone unfortunate enough to live nearby. These shoreline incidents are irrefutable evidence that Project Chronos did not merely create a contained accident. It fundamentally destabilized the space-time field of an entire geographical region. The internal investigation into the fate of Dr. Alastair Thorne, designated Operation Pandora, remains the most heavily redacted and highly sensitive aspect of the Chronos leak. Officially, Thorne perished during the TD-74 Alpha incident, presumed vaporized or subjected to irreversible temporal degradation. However, the Operation Pandora files, fragments of which we have recovered, suggest a far stranger and more chilling conclusion. Thorne may not have died, but may have become an integral, self-aware component of the temporal anomaly he created. The theory hinges on the analysis of the last security camera feed, the shaky footage described in the initial cleanup report. Just milliseconds before the complete system failure, the footage shows Thorne standing in the resonator dome. As the temporal wave hit, his form didn't disintegrate. It seemed to shimmer and become indistinct, merging visually with the ambient light. Post-incident telemetry detected an extremely high, continuous energy signature localized precisely where Thorne was standing, a signature inconsistent with inert chromium-22 residue. The hypothesis put forth by the Pandora analysts is that Thorne achieved a form of chronal integration, meaning his consciousness and physical form were locked into an extremely localized, perpetual temporal loop. He is effectively trapped in a singularity of his own making, perhaps repeating the final moments of the experiment endlessly. Supporting this horrifying idea are the sporadic and highly specific power fluctuations that continue to emanate from Site 47. Sensors outside the collapsed structure occasionally pick up brief, massive spikes of energy, precisely correlating with the required power levels for Thorne's Echo experiment, the experiment that caused the disaster. It is theorized that Thorne, trapped within the loop, is attempting to restart the procedure, perhaps believing he can still fix the error. Each spike is in effect a ghost experiment, a replay of the catastrophe. Furthermore, a highly classified memo from Operation Pandora mentions the use of highly specialized, shielded audio receivers lowered into the collapsed shaft remnants. These receivers reportedly captured brief, fragmented vocalizations far deeper than the surface. One analyst's handwritten note, attached to the memo before redaction, simply reads, "It's him. He's still arguing with Vargas." The feedback loop is self-sustaining. This suggests that the final, fateful confrontation captured on the Chronos Leak audio is not just a recording of history, but an event that is perpetually happening right now, deep within the sealed core of April Woods, proving that the ban is not merely an act of quarantine, but a grim acknowledgement that a living, temporal threat remains active within the perimeter. The enduring mystery of Project Chronos and the permanent ban on entry to April Woods hinges on a core conflict. Was the temporal phenomenon intentionally created or accidentally released? The official ADI inquiry concluded it was a catastrophic engineering failure due to unauthorized power escalation. But the deeper layers of the leaked documents, particularly the highly philosophical internal briefings Thorne gave to his senior team, suggest that the failure was perhaps the intended, if horrific, success. Thorne wasn't just trying to send a signal backward in time. He was trying to understand the mechanism by which reality self-corrects. He theorized that the weak spot in April Woods wasn't just a place to access time. It was a fundamental, universal buffer zone, a place where chronological errors were naturally neutralized. His Echo experiment might have been a deliberate attempt to overwhelm that buffer, forcing a permanent, self-sustaining temporal instability. If this is true, the ban wasn't just necessary to prevent outsiders from entering. It was necessary because the resulting anomaly is precisely what Thorne intended to create: a stable, open pathway to alternate or adjacent temporal realities, a doorway that they could not, and perhaps should not, control. The sheer level of resource commitment to maintaining the SDZ, the constant patrolling, the advanced subterranean monitoring, the immediate interception of any unauthorized drones or aircraft, indicates that the government believes the anomaly is a continuous, active threat, demanding constant vigilance. The most terrifying implication remains the nature of the temporal dissonance event itself. If the woods are now a self-correcting temporal exclusion zone, that implies the woods are actively working to repair the damage. But how does a geographical area repair a hole in time? Does it erase the evidence? Does it overwrite the events? The most paranoid, yet logically consistent, interpretation of the ongoing energy spikes and ghost echoes is that the woods are attempting to reset themselves, possibly erasing everything, including the existence of Site-47 and Project Chronos, but that the residual chromium-22 interference is causing these resets to fail, resulting in chaotic, incomplete temporal remediation. The final, horrifying conclusion is that April Woods is trapped in a state of continuous temporal warfare, a battle between the natural forces of causality and the technological remnants of man's attempt to manipulate them. The ban is the only thing preventing the ripples from reaching the rest of the world. And if those forces ever win, or if they ever fully lose control, the consequences will ripple far beyond the dense, forbidden canopy of the woods, potentially rewriting our history without warning or memory. This is why the audio of the Chronos leak remains the most valuable piece of evidence. It is the sound of the moment we gave up control, the final, desperate cry before the total sacrifice of a sacred space for the sake of global chronological integrity. We may never know what happened to Thorne or the others, but the perpetual silence surrounding April Woods screams the terrifying truth. Something fundamental changed that day, and it can never be undone.